to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Jody Lynn, I've been doing podcasts for 12 years now. I'm about to learn something new about podcasting.
Yes.
I've never heard about. We were just getting clued in on this before we got started. And I said, wait, we got to tell everybody about this. This is cool. Although maybe that's kind of violating the rule. Once you find out what we're talking about, you'll see why I'm saying that. But let's find out whether that is violating the rule, and then we'll just violate the rule. It'll be okay. But our guest today is Ramona Galey, and she was just telling us she has started a private podcast. I said, well, is that like you have to know where it is? And she said, yes. So tell us about this, Ramona. This is really interesting.
Well, it's an idea I had. I don't even know exactly how it happened, but I had this idea, and then I mentioned it I started on it, and then it was so much fun, and I started mentioning it to people, and everybody's like, "Oh, what a great idea!" And so it's just kind of taken a life of its own. And yes, it's private, and yes, you have to be invited to listen to it. And I am really having a lot of fun with it. The people who come on, we've been having just a great time with it. And so it's, and once you've listened to it, once you're in the group, then you can come on too. If you want to be I call them guest hosts, visiting hosts. The host comes on. It's the podcast where the answer changes depending on who's asking the question, and it's the podcast where the host changes and the guest stays the same. So the host comes on and asks me questions. They choose their own topic. I've got 50 or 100, I don't know, potential topics, really great topics, but you can also just bring your own topic and you ask me questions, whatever you want to know about that topic. And what we're finding is that this format or platform, wherever you want to describe it, has been just so much fun because I'm just speaking extemporaneously from my experience, from my belief system, and I'm coming out with a lot of stuff on any particular given topic, whether it's like clarity or authenticity or self-sabotage or imposter complex or whatever your question is. It's in the spiritual growth, arena. But whatever that question is, we're getting some answers, some ideas, some perspectives that are brand new, that are different from what everybody else is talking about. And so it's just this really great way of getting to know each other, of building a library of information, of ideas on any particular one topic. So it's going to be easily searchable as the library continues to grow. And I'm just very excited about it. And only people that I invited get to hear it. So yeah, your guests are invited to join us.
Jody Lynn, I think she's actually figured out how to be a guest on her own podcast.
Yeah, it's like you're the permanent guest. I love that.
The permanent guest.
It's a reverse podcast.
Well, it's so much easier for me to answer questions than it is for me to ask questions. Like to find a guest and go through all that trouble. Yeah. I'm just looking for the efficient way of getting a conversation.
Yeah, it's like a live coaching call almost.
Yeah,
it is.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Except it's fun. It's very lighthearted. We laugh through the whole thing. Nobody's getting serious. Nobody's crying. Nobody's, got angst going on. It's just an exploration of concepts in a very, very open, supported, loving format. It's fun. You guys are going to like it.
It kind of sounds like a little bit of a marketing ploy. It reminds me of a brick and mortar restaurant that opened in New York City.
Okay.
It opened as if it were a speakeasy. You had to know where it was.
Oh, like
you had to know that it existed.
You had the secret,
and you had to know the password to get in.
It is a little bit like that. It is a little bit like there's a little flavor of that to it.
Yeah, and it worked beautifully because once you have a secret, that everybody wants to be in on the secret, and that's
right.
Around, right.
Right. I love it. I love that perspective on it.
Yeah.
That is so cool. And how clever, too. I mean, now I'm a host, and Jody Lynn will tell you I'm really good at asking questions. But what if you're not good at asking questions? You just figured out how to solve that one, too.
Well, finding the guests. seems like I've never had I've never done a podcast before. That I still don't really consider this a true podcast, because you got to figure out how to stream it, what platform to put it on, and then how to advertise it and all that stuff. I'm not doing any of that. This is like the easy peasy way of podcasting. The lazy person. Let's say this is the lazy podcast.
I love it.
Yeah.
There was a mail order book that came out in the 1980s called The Lazy Man's Lazy Man's Path to Riches.
Oh yeah, I remember that book.
And when you order the book, it tells you to create a book and publish a book that says, here's the lazy man's path to riches. I mean, it's like this circular thing that just kept going over and over again. So it kind of sounds a little bit like that, but it sounds more like you just found a way to have fun doing it without getting all frantic about the technology, which
well, exactly.
Very smart. Because I mean, I have an IT background. So like when I started this 12 years ago, well, first of all, we didn't even have Streamyard or Zoom or Riverside or any of these other things that are out there. I had to like make it up as I went along. So it's a lot easier now from that perspective. But even with what we have now, it's still a little bit intimidating for people. So you say, well, screw all that. We're just going to record and you have to find us.
Yeah. And I also wanted it to be a searchable library. Like I wanted to be an actual tool for people who are interested. And if you're not interested, that's fine. Like,
sure.
like I'm not going to advertise to you and like try to convince you to be interested. Only, like insiders would be interested anyway. So let's just do it privately and just have fun. And, I love it. I love it.
How long have you been doing this now?
I don't know, a month maybe. I don't know.
A month? Okay.
Yeah, not long. I've got about 12 or 15 sessions done.
Okay.
And when somebody says, "Hey, can I do one?" then I say, "Okay," and then usually people end up doing 3 or 4 because we have so much fun. But typically they'll come in with one idea, and then they'll say, "Can we do this again?" I say, "Yeah." That's the answer. Yes. You don't have to qualify. You don't have to like fill out a form ahead of time. There's no like pre-podcast interview.
Yeah.
There's no, you don't have to run it out to your email list. I mean, these things all stop conversations. All these technical and marketing requirements stop conversations from happening. I want conversations to happen. So
I hear you on that. I totally hear you on that. In fact, that was one of the things when I started my own podcast. I wanted to eliminate as many of them as I possibly could. Now, I didn't go to the extent you did of just like, you got to know about this thing. Otherwise, you ain't going to find it. But what I did do is just say, well, screw the podcast interviews, screw the forums, screw all that stuff. Let's just have a conversation. Real simple.
Cool.
That's the way I thought
Very
it should be. And by the way, 2,000 episodes later, that has proven out to be a pretty effective way to do it.
Congratulations. Wow. I didn't realize you were quite that high yet. That's 2,000.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
And, well, being high is probably a good way to describe that. But yes.
I didn't mean it like that.
It's not all that inaccurate. It's fairly close. I mean, you have to do it as often. There was a time I was doing it 5 days a week. Not only was I doing it 5 days a week, there was 1 year when I did it twice a day, 5 days a week. So that's why I say I had to be high in order to do it.
I was going to say, you must really enjoy it. That's the only reason you would ever do that.
Exactly it. That's exactly it. Because, I mean, ostensibly it was about law of attraction, but after the first 400 episodes, you got that covered. You've talked it out, but you want to keep going because you're enjoying it so much. That's the way I felt about it. So I just kind of expanded it to, well, we'll just talk about life. And that gave me the justification to keep going. Not that I need a whole lot. I was going to keep going anyway, but
well, and the thing that I like about mine is it's not necessarily about the person, although the person is featured very prominently. The guest host, what do you want to call that? The person asking the question, but it's not so much about finding someone who's going to be interesting, but finding someone who has a topic that they find interesting. And then I match the interesting part of it, right? Like whatever comes, like I'm just really enjoy the conversation. And I love just weighing in just extemporaneously, just on, like what comes to me in this moment about this particular topic. So when the next person comes and asks about the same topic, it really is a completely different conversation. But by the time you've had 4 or 5 or 10 conversations about the same topic, if you're really looking for some new ideas or some guidance or some even just frivolity on a particular topic, there it is. Just go look it up, type it in the search engine, and there it is.
It makes
So
sense.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually pretty much what we do here, a little bit differently. But I mean, Jody Lynn was originally a guest on the show,
Cool.
and
Very
then here we
cool.
are 2.5 years later, and she's been a co-host all this time, and one of my
Nice.
best, and I've been loving having her, and
Oh,
it's just it just kind of organically evolved from there.
beautiful.
So just mine was a little bit more straightforward. Yours was more interesting. Yours, I mean, you're literally reminding me of that speakeasy. It wasn't really a speakeasy. They acted like they were a speakeasy. In order to find them, first of all, there was no outside door to get to it. You had to
Whoa.
go in through a restaurant and know where there was a
Ah.
wall with a fake door in
Oh
order to
wow,
get in.
how cool is that, right? But it wasn't because they were serving alcohol when it wasn't
No,
allowed, right? It
no.
was just
It,
for
ju-
the fun
it
of
was
it.
just for the fun of it. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great. That
Yeah.
sounds really good.
Yeah, and it
I
was
would
an
love
instant
that.
hit, of course, because nobody can keep a secret. So
Yeah, you just have to tell 10 people and then
yeah, it's
everybody
done at
knows.
that point, right?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. No, that's fun. They're very
That's
fun.
fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now that we're having fun, let's get a little bit of the seriousness in there too, because there's a reason why you started this. There's a reason why you're doing what you're doing. There's a story behind it, and
Yeah.
we always like to hear what that story is because there's usually some good juice in it. So tell us your story. How'd you get there?
Well, let's see. How far back should I go? I was not a woo person, as we call us now
Me
woo
neither,
woo.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so I came from a background of logic and discipline
That's right.
and all of that. Even though I was a musician, I was a classical musician. It was my first career coming out of the gate. But then I branched into a lot of different things. But I had no spiritual paradigm, none whatsoever.
Mhm.
And I had a life partner. She was my just absolute just love and joy and just my whole life. We were together 24 years and she got pancreatic cancer and she passed away in my arms, right?
Mm.
So I was verklempt, as they say. I was beside myself. I mean, it was a very, very close relationship. I felt like my only source of unconditional love had just left the planet forever. And I was planning on following her. I wasn't I didn't do it. I mean, I was planning the suicide note actually when the phone rang, and it was about a week after her death. And my friend Madge had just left, and her friend Lordella called and said, "Oh, Ramona, I just heard about Betty. That's awful. Oh my gosh!" And I was crying. I was upset about something, and but I wasn't talking about my imminent demise. I was just talking about Betty. And she said, wait, you've got to stop thinking like that right now. And I said, well, duh, but I don't know how. I mean, I was 55 years old. I felt like I had been trying to control my thoughts my whole life, and I didn't know how. And she said, well, have you ever heard of Abraham Hicks? And I said, no, what's that? Is that a disease? Like Braxton Hicks.
Some people would say so, actually.
Yeah.
Some people think it's a cult. Some people think it's a disease, whatever. And so she started telling me about it, and it made sense. And I didn't know why it made sense, but I knew that, I knew that my life depended on me doing something different, and this was something different. I felt like I'd already tried everything. I had tried Judaism, I had tried Christianity, I'd tried friends, I had tried just all kinds of stuff, even meditating even, but I just felt like that was just not, it was a non-runner for me. So, but as she was speaking and just kind of in a summary way, telling me the kind of the gist of the whole thing, I was like, well, that actually makes sense. So I thought, well, she says, I'll send you, I've got 50 CDs. She'd been on this subscription program for like 25 years, right? Yeah. So she had 2 years of CDs that for some reason she could never give away. Every other CD for over 25 years, she had listened to it until she'd gotten everything out of it and then given it away to kind of spread the word. She had this box of CDs that she'd never been able to give away. So she sent them to me. They turned out to be, now get this, okay? The year before, the year leading up to, and the year after Jerry's death.
Oh my
Hicks.
goodness. Yeah.
Esther's husband, right? So I got to get to know them as a couple, this beautiful, beautiful relationship,
Oh yeah.
and very reminiscent in a lot of ways of my own relationship. Watch her go through Jerry's death and come out the other side.
Mm.
And that was exactly what I needed. That and the 2 books that she told me to go get. I went to the library. They were on the shelf. Asking It Is Given and Getting Into the Vortex with the guided meditations in the back. They were both on the shelf that day. I checked at least once a month for the next several years just because I was so curious about this. They were never on
Never
the
there.
shelf ever
Yeah.
again. They were always checked out. That day they were both on the shelf. And of course I ordered them from Amazon. They came a couple days later. But that day I was able to go and get them and start reading right now.
Mm.
And that's what I love about that whole thing, is that as soon as I started getting exposed to that material, and especially once I figured out that they were on YouTube, you could go on YouTube and say Abraham Hicks death, Abraham Hicks drugs, Abraham Hicks abortion, Abraham Hicks, whatever. I had all these questions,
Mhm.
and every single answer resonated so clearly with me
Mm.
that by the end of like the first, I'm going to say 2 weeks, I had decided, okay, this, I can actually see this possibly like being the answer. I'm going to give it a month. So I gave it a month. At the end of the month, I decided, okay, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm pretty sure it's not a train. That whole joke. So I said, I'm going to give myself a year, meaning that if it didn't work out, if it didn't turn out to be soothing enough or uplifting enough, or I don't even know what the standard was, but at the end of that year, if it wasn't panning out the way I was hoping it would, I could always off myself later. So I always gave myself permission to take it out later. But that's how it all started. That's literally how it all started. And I just studied it. I ate and slept and breathed it. I ingested all of their material like 8, 10, 12 hours a day for a couple of years
Mm.
until I knew it like inside and out. And then I started teaching it. They say if you want to know how to know anything really well, you just teach it.
Mhm.
And that's how it all got started.
Very cool. Yeah, well, we have a number of parallels actually, because when I first started my podcast, I was 55 years old. I
Ah,
was in a very similar mental state from yours, from a different cause. My cause was my business that I had started years ago had gone up in flames with the 2008 financial crisis.
ooh, yeah.
I mean, just disappeared entirely. And I was married. My wife's business also disappeared. So our entire income disappeared within a month, which was terrifying. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
really horribly frightening. And I had so much trouble climbing out of it afterward. I couldn't understand why I was having so much trouble.
Right.
I got exposed through the movie The Secret first. I didn't even hear about
Okay.
Abraham Hicks until about 2 years into it. But then I heard about Abraham Hicks and had a
Mhm.
very similar reaction to what you had. In fact, when I found out that Esther was one of the originals on The Secret,
Yeah.
and got taken off, I got pissed at Rhonda. Like, what the hell are you doing?
Because she dared to insist that we include emotions and guidance,
Oh,
like true
yeah,
guidance.
can't have
Yeah,
any of
yeah.
that stuff.
Quite a
At the
story.
very end of the movie, she says, "Feel good," but beside
Right.
that point, yeah.
Yeah, the audience wasn't ready for that. That was the excuse
Yeah,
given. Yeah, so
yeah. Well, I
interesting.
was ready. I went and found a copy of the original anyway, just so I could have a copy of the original.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, very, very similar trajectory. And I
Very cool.
think it's fascinating whenever I encounter somebody like us who, at a later point in life discover this stuff and we're faced with the reality of it. Because that's the way it seemed to me. When you were just describing about how it just resonated with you, I had the same feeling. And for me, it felt real. It felt more real
Yes.
than anything else I'd ever believed before.
Yes. That's really well said. That is exactly how it feels to me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then the fun part beyond that has been doing the podcast and then meeting people like Jody Lynn. Now, Jody Lynn, quite a bit younger than me. She discovered this stuff at a much earlier age, which I celebrate. I think it's wonderful that she
Yeah.
was able to discover it earlier. And then hearing what her perspective is and others, of her age group talking about it and so forth. And then the whole perspective thing has come into it for me. So I start experiencing everybody's different perspectives, including the skeptics and, the people who are halfway there and so forth. And my goodness, it's just turned into a remarkable journey for me where I've just experienced, 2,000 episodes. I'm more than 2,000 times I've been talking about this and getting all these different perspectives and learning about stuff and learning about
Yeah.
myself and developing all that and doing it
That's
from
beautiful.
age 55 on. So
That's really awesome. And I want to
there's
say,
life
like,
after 55. How about that?
Right? And I want to say thank you for your service. Like
Yeah.
it's huge. I mean, I love that. Thank you. That's really awesome.
She's the first one, Jody Lynn. She's the first one who anticipated the way I end the program.
No.
No one ever's ever done that.
Why? How do you end the program?
Well, you have to wait and see now.
You'll have to wait for
Okay.
It's so interesting. We're talking about law of attraction and Abraham Hicks and like all of these things. And something that's been on my mind over the last couple of weeks, and I'm not really exactly sure why, outside of life in general. But just, I've been seeing these TikTok videos about people who have had near-death experiences. And then in their near-death experiences, they're all saying that, like they can see a review of their life and that, there was these points in time where they were supposed to change and then they didn't. And then something really bad had to happen, this near-death experience, so that they could, decide, I am going to change, or I'm going to go this direction or whatever. And, as you were telling your story, Ramona, I got full body chills. Because you could just clearly see that, this was meant to happen, as unfortunate and tragic as it was. And I'm getting chills right now, this was the opportunity to go in the direction that you were meant to in this lifetime.
Absolutely.
And we look at tragedy, and like Walt, you were explaining what you have been through and how devastating that was to your life. And often, like when we're in those moments, it's like, I can't get through this. Like this is so rough and this is so tough and it's awful. And I have my own experiences like that. And then when you look back and you see how all of the pieces just fell into alignment and it led you right here, it's like it had to happen. It had to happen. And it is the most beautiful blessing. And I've been thinking about that a lot. So that's probably why that came up. But that's what I think about your stories.
Yeah, and it didn't take very long after exposure to this material and the way I just absorbed it like a dry sponge, just sucking it up before. I mean, it was probably 3 or 4 weeks at the most. And I started telling people that I felt like Betty's death was the best gift she'd ever given me. And she and I had, she gave me some great gifts. I mean, just unspeakable as from small to large. And but when I started saying that, people really didn't understand what I was saying. They were still stuck in the tragedy of it, right? But and it didn't stop me from grieving her. I mean, was still like falling over, like being knocked over literally physically from a wave of grief that would seem like would just come out of nowhere, and I would be on the floor like just sobbing. So I mean, it's not like I was kind of occupying 2 different paradigms at the same time there for a while. But the new paradigm was so clear and so real, like you were saying, Walt. It was tangible, it was tactile, it was kinesthetic to me. And I'm a kinesthetic processor, so of course I didn't know that then. But my whole trajectory over the last 10 years has been like really getting in touch with my guidance, which is in my body, and feeling those sensations, the sensations as well as the emotions, and really putting all that together. It all started right there. And so, but people don't understand, and until you've actually been through this, it's really kind of hard to get your head around it until you felt it. It's really a feeling thing, I think.
Well, it's actually been portrayed on television. Are you familiar with the Apple TV series Ted Lasso?
I keep hearing about it. I don't have Apple TV, so I haven't seen even an episode of it. But I keep
you got to get along enough one time to watch the series. But anyway, and season 1 is the really important season to watch anyway.
Okay.
But there's a scene in there from I think season 2 or 3. I can't remember which one. Season 2, I think. There's a woman who plays a psychotherapist who, just to give you a quick idea of the series, it's about an American football coach who goes over to England to coach soccer, which he knows nothing about. And of course, that creates all the kinds of comedic.
Of course he did.
Right. Well, one of the things that happens over there is that there are issues with players, especially star players, high money players who come in with egos and so forth, and it creates all kinds of chaos on the team. And so they bring in a therapist to help iron out some of these issues that come along, along for the ride, so to speak. This therapist has one of the best cliche type phrases that she uses that I've heard in the last 20 years. She says, "The truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off."
I love it. I love it.
And that's what you're describing. That's
Yeah.
exactly what you're describing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it really is.
Because that's how it works. That's really been the theme of this show for the last 7 or 8 years, bringing on guests talking about how life pissed them off before it just elevated their experience and they had to share it with the world.
Well, yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. First, it'll piss you off. It's so, so true.
Isn't it true? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So it actually made it to television, which is pretty cool.
that is very cool. Actually, that's very cool. I'm gonna have to join Apple TV. I can see that. At least
Yeah, yeah, you
long
gotta
enough
watch
to
that
binge
one.
the one show. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
if
look to see what
nothing
else.
else, even if you never actually watched the series, go onto YouTube and look for season 1, episode 8, the dart room scene, or
Okay.
the dart game scene. Just watch
He knows
that.
it so well.
That one, that scene is like it's like
Blow your mind, huh? Okay.
the
All
perfect
right.
scene.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I've often felt Ramona and Walt like that. I'm just so weird for thinking this. Like that like you had said, Ramona, like, you know, Betty's death was like the greatest gift that she gave me. Like I have those moments in my life and people are looking at you like, are you fucking dumb? Like what is wrong with you? Like you're
Or what a horrible thing to say, they think,
like, what
right?
a horrible thing to say. Are you stupid? Like, and I've refrained from talking about all of those things super publicly. Like I say everything on this show. I'm okay with that. It doesn't count here, but you know, in a lot of different arenas, I won't say those things because people are like astonished and like you can see visibly like shocked and you piss them off.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's probably even more extreme at your age than it would be for Walt or me to say the exact same thing at a cocktail party somewhere or in a meeting somewhere. For you to know it at your age is exemplary. I mean, it's really, that's phenomenal. So congratulations. That's beautiful. Really, really good.
Well, we also have an advantage, Ramona, you and I, because we got to a point in life where we could go piss somebody off and we just don't care.
Yeah, we just exactly.
I'm only entering the I don't care phase of my life. What is that? I heard that it starts when you're like 40 or something like that. So
one of the first things I ever heard long before Abraham was, I've gotten to the age where I've come to realize that what you think about me is none of my business. That was the first version of that I ever heard. And I heard that probably when I was about 40. And I was thinking, yeah, I want to be like that, but I didn't know how to be like that, but I knew I wanted to be like that. And I was like that to some extent, but not completely. And just, it's so funny. I just saw earlier today one of those like reels or like something on Facebook. I don't even know the technical reason for it, but it's a woman, and she says, when somebody, how does it go? How did she say it? When somebody, when somebody doesn't like me, I have to put on my glasses. And she puts on a pair of glasses to see if I give a, what. And it turns out I don't.
Turns out I don't. I like that.
I don't.
I'll get really there one day.
Well, actually, Jody Lynn, in my experience of talking with you for the last 2.5 years, you're more than halfway there.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you've been making a lot of progress in that direction. Yeah.
I think it's the Canadian in me, we're so apologetic and polite, and we just fall over, bump into somebody bumps into you. Sorry.
Have you seen the Wacka Canadian? It was in the New York Times.
No.
I don't remember when. Within the last 10 years, I'm pretty sure. But Wacka Canadian is like whack-a-mole. You know the game whack-a-mole? There's a thing. So there's the game, and it's set up, and it says Wacka Canadian. There's 9 holes, and there's a Canadian gentleman with a head through one of the holes, and there's somebody standing there with one of the the big racket or whatever you call that.
Yeah.
And the Canadian saying, "Oh, I'm apologize in advance for not for in case you miss," or something like that. And that's like a Canadian.
It's so awesome. It's so true.
And you've heard about Canadian riots, right? Canadian riots and protests. That's where somebody's standing there with a sign that says, "I'm really rather upset."
It is hilarious because the whole riot the convoy, whatever riots that happened during COVID, like the actual video footage, there wasn't a lot of it because it was very skewed by the media. But I had friends that were down there, and there's like bouncy castles, and hot tubs. And cleaning the street, like that street had never been so clean. The amount of crime like went down to zero for those 2 weeks that they occupied that street and whatever. Like that is a typical Canadian protest where they're like, oh, please, thank you, let me serve you coffee and donuts. Like they had barbecues and bouncy castles and hot tubs. That was our version of a protest.
I love it.
Actually, I would say the rest of the world could possibly learn from that. I mean, that would
possibly.
That would actually be pretty cool. It would ruin newscasts all over the world.
I was going to say that the media would have to pretty much be quiet or be truthful for anybody to actually know what was going on. But
I mean, if a few newscasts went away, I would miss them. I mean,
I don't watch any news.
Me neither.
I don't even know what they are anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't paid attention since Walter Cronkite left the air. After that, I forgot I was done.
After who left?
Walter Cronkite.
Oh, yeah, Walter Cronkite. He was a rock.
Yeah. Well, he was the last newscaster who actually just gave you the news without giving you his opinion.
Right.
That today is non-existent.
Yeah, it's all editorial right now.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's fine. That's what they want to do. They're just not going to get me watching it. That's all.
Way too upstream for me.
Yeah.
Well, we just heard a really fun half hour of how you got to where you are and all the different variations that we can do all off of that. But now that you're there, tell us what you do with it. Besides doing this really cool podcast that you have to know about in order to hear it, otherwise forget it. You're never going to find it because it's not available in any of the places you would normally look. But other than that, what else do you do?
Well, I'm a coach. I channel. I mean, I basically followed in Esther's footsteps about 5 years ago. I received entity named as Oprah, O-P-R-A. There's no H on there. I'm not receiving Oprah Winfrey. But it's a big joke why their name is Oprah. And I received them for people both in private settings and in small group settings, but still one-on-one. And it's called the Alignment Circle, and that's what I do. And I'm also now an author. I wrote a book From Lonely to Fearless, and I'm working on my second book, Stop Overthinking, and it's all overthinking. And so kind of a takeoff on the don't sweat the small stuff idea. Mm-hmm. So I call myself a vibrational mentor, and more colloquially, if I'm speaking to a mainstream audience, I call myself a spiritual success coach. And I help people get out of their heads and get back into their hearts and into their bodies. And we get just tremendous breakthroughs and joy. And it's all very just very lighthearted and yeah. And then we meet twice a week. The group meets twice a week to get the momentum really going, because I find that that's the biggest thing that we're missing. I basically provide the thing that I wished I'd had when I first started following this whole thing. I would have given anything to be able to work privately with Esther Hicks, to talk to Abraham, and that wasn't possible. And so I provide the thing that I really, really wanted myself, and I help a very small number of people in that way, more people with the books. And it's intimate, it's beautiful, it's loving, it's just, Oprah just bathes us all in unconditional love twice a week. It's quite an experience.
And you actually have that in common with Jody Lynn, because she's also a channel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And who is your entity?
They call themselves the Abundance Consciousness Council.
Nice.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
I've also had other channels on, including there's one gentleman named David Strickle who's very, very much like Esther, in that when he starts channeling, you ask one question and 15 minutes later you get past the second question. It's one of those kind of
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it just comes. It's called the Stream of David for a reason. It's a stream. It just keeps coming. It's a stream that keeps giving.
That's amazing to me, because Oprah, especially at the beginning, Oprah would sit there for, I don't know, what felt like 62 years. It was probably 30 seconds. But then they would say one word. Seriously, that's
One.
one word, frequently, not all the time, but frequently one word. And then the most amazing part was that the questioner would be like, "Oh, yes." Of course, there's all that nonverbal communication that's going on, right? That they're also responding to that they're not
Yeah.
necessarily aware of. But frequently, oh well, always. I never had a case where everybody was like, what does that mean? Like it was always like, oh wow, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And Ramona the human is sitting there going, what? What are we saying? Because that's one word,
What's
Yeah, clue
happening?
us in on this one. We'd like to be knowing too.
Yeah, so that's where it started. Eyes closed, one or two words, very, very succinct. And Oprah still never really goes on and on very much at all. Not anything compared to like Abraham's initial monologue or Abraham on occasional. You see it like in Abraham Fun, somebody will post, in a transcript of an entire answer and it goes on and
Oh
on
yeah.
and on. No,
Mhm.
this is the opposite of that. That's one way that we didn't follow in Esther's. I started off following in her footsteps and then pretty quickly started branching off in different ways. But Esther's my hero. She saved my life, and I have tremendous respect for anything that they do. I'm down with it. So
Mhm.
It reminded me of a time that David was on the program and Jody Lynn was my co-host that day. And so
oh,
we decided to have a conversation between the two streams, right? So
really,
Jody Lynn went into you don't actually do trans channeling. So
I'm not live in front of people now.
no. Well, okay, all right. So there's another side that hasn't come out, but
Okay.
but so she wasn't trans channeling, but David was, and so
Okay.
David, the stream would give its answer, which was like 10 minutes long, and then Jody Lynn would give her 25-word answer. It was like, oh, okay, but it was perfectly useful information, just so it was kind of
Yeah.
imbalanced in the sense of how much time was going to one and then to the other, which was
Uh-huh.
a little odd to me at first. But then once I heard and kind of absorbed what was coming through, it all made sense anyway. So it didn't matter.
Of course.
And that was the ultimate conclusion. I realized it doesn't matter how long it takes to express. It doesn't matter what words are used. It doesn't
That's
matter,
right.
what the message is from the messenger, who the message is for.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, it's just waiting for what one author called the fullness to be reached. Once you have fullness, you've got everything.
I like that. The fullness to be
Yeah.
reached.
Yeah, Robert
Yeah.
Heinlein, by the way, was the one who wrote that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
For me, like my channel is a little bit different in the way that it's more of like an evidentiary channel. Like I could do a lot of research with it. And when my channel is speaking to me, they'll give me like great detail of the weirdest things that are important. Like, if we're channeling about something that happened in, I don't know, the early 1900s or like something like that. They'll be like, yeah, and this girl, she was from this house and she was gluten intolerant. So they had this kind of sourdough bread and this is where the strain came from and la, la, la. Like it'll be like this
Wow.
monologue of like,
How
really
cool is that?
Yeah. So it's really great for like the research projects that I've been involved with and like learning. And that's really how my channel really began to develop, was this quest to understand how money works, monetary policy, abundance, currency, like all of that stuff. And so there was very detailed information that I needed to understand. And that's why they were paired up with me, is to deliver that. So
And
yeah.
isn't that cool? Because I mean,
So
Oprah
cool.
says all the time that the vessel, like I'm the vessel, you're the vessel.
Yeah.
So the vessel determines what comes through because you've got your questioner, your hot seater, which it sounds like you don't really actually work with hot seaters other than yourself. But and, I'm working directly with hot seaters. Esther's working with hot seaters. So whoever's asking the question is kind of determining the answer. But the human vessel determines like what the preferences are, like through our preferences. So
Yeah.
like Esther obviously enjoys talking to large groups of people, wants to educate the world. She's a teacher. She calls herself a teacher. She doesn't call herself a channel. I call myself a mentor because I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be even a coach. I want to be a mentor because that's really specific. That's like role modeling, a few words here and there, a couple of fine tunings, but but really the vibrational essence does the vast majority of the work. It's not that it's up to me to like instruct. And Oprah like is so different from what you described. They couldn't care less about the past or details. They could not care less. They want to go right here, right now. How does it feel? Details, go pound sand. History, no, 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 no. Isn't that cool that we can all do what feels really good to us and what serves our purposes? And we're all doing it, whether we know or not. You know, every single human on the planet is channeling and receiving. And we all get to do what we want with it and to it and in it. You know, it's so great. I love that.
So beautiful.
I know that in my own case, I doubted for the longest time that I could channel. And even now to this day, I still am resistant to it. But I have actually done it in very limited circumstances here on the podcast. Because like we were talking about earlier, I'm really good at asking questions. My dad was like the ultimate question asker. So I learned a ton from him about how to do it. And it's really easy for me. But even for me, there are times where I kind of run out of questions. And in the past, what I would do is I'd kind of force my way through. I'd usually find my way to something and then be able to ask something. But I thought that might be a good time to see if this whole channeling thing actually works. So one time I kind of dared myself. Like, I think the way I justified it was, well, if this doesn't work out well, I just won't publish the episode. Real simple. Make it, take all the pressure off. Sure. But the next time that I find myself in that spot, I'm going to just try it and see what happens. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no clue at all. Well, the opportunity came, and there I was. I was faced with, okay, I have nothing to ask here. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to open my mouth and see what happens.
There you go.
I opened my mouth, and I started stumbling through words, and then I kind of went off in a direction that was not where I was intending to go. And by the time I was done talking, I said to myself, does that make any sense? Is this rational? Literally, and I've said this many times, I don't listen to my own episodes. I played that one back because I had to.
Yeah, you'd have to. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And not only did it make sense, it was brilliant.
It was brilliant. Of course it was.
And literally what I said to myself was, where the fuck did that come from?
I remember telling my dad, that I was channeling and, like just more about spirituality. I was finally like really opening up to him. And I was like, oh God, how is he going to take this? I'm a channel. And he was like, okay, well, like, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, I receive information that isn't coming from me. It's coming from the other side, the unseen, it's guides, angels, whatever. And he's like, And I thought my dad's an old cowboy. So very rugged man. And I'm thinking, okay, he's going to think I'm crazy. And like 3, 2, 1, like I was just waiting for the response. And he's like, I think I channel when I do eulogies. And I was like, what? He's like, obviously my dad is asked to do like everybody's eulogy. He's just a great speaker. He's a rodeo announcer, chuck wagon announcer. Everybody wants, all the cowboys want him to do their eulogy. He's very well respected. And he's like, I can always figure out the beginning, like the first sentence, how we're going to open it up. And I know how we're going to end. And he's like, the rest, the middle is blank. And I just let it flow. And
so
like,
cool.
That's channeling, Dad. And he's like, cool. And that was it. That was the end of our conversation. Like,
what a great conversation.
Okay.
So all that build up, right? All the build up, and it turned out nothing.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. He gets it. He understands. He doesn't think I'm a freak or like weird or, whatever.
Yeah. And I remember when I first started listening to Abraham said very clearly the reason Esther is so, Abraham, can I do this too? What Esther's doing? Yes, of course you can. However, we will say that Esther is so good at this because she was living life happily ever after. She had married a wealthy man who loved her to death, and she loved him to death, and she didn't have to work anymore, and she didn't have any strong opinions. And here, what I was in the throes of grief that literally knocked me to the ground, and I had a lot of strong judgmental opinions. And so I thought, well, that's something I could never do then, because of this whole thing. So it took 5 years for me to start doing it. And it just came to me as a knowing that I was going to start doing it. And then some friends kind of encouraged me to do it with them for the first time. And then it just kind of took off. But yeah, I mean, isn't it cool how we all come to this? It doesn't matter what we call it, doesn't matter what flavor it is. It's the same thing, but yet always different according to who we are and what we want. I just love that. I love
And
And
that
how we need
infinite
to like
flavor
variety.
too.
receive it.
What was
Yeah,
that?
very well. And how we need to like receive it. I'm very detailed. I like the details. I like to understand how things work. That's like a driver of mine. So
Yeah.
of course they're gonna speak to me like that.
Yeah. And I love intimacy. I've always just loved having one really good close friend over, and have a talk about what's really the most important to us. What's on my heart. Even long before I didn't speak it like that. I didn't use that language, but that was always my goal, was to connect with people. And I thought I was afraid of people back then. And I mean, I was afraid of people. And I guess what I thought was that I didn't like people, because I didn't recognize that I had fear. But so what Oprah does is very, very intimate, very emotional, very, the vibrational essence of things, and really getting into exactly how somebody's feeling right now, whether their words match their vibration or how they're expressing what they want. And it's this like really close thing that's very different from what Esther does. And it sounds like it's very, different from what you're doing, Jody Lynn, but it's different from what everybody's doing, because of course we're all different. I
Yeah, I
just
love
love
the fact
that.
that you use the word flavor. That's the word that I use with
Yeah.
David, because his flavor is different from Esther's flavor, who's different
Yes.
from Jody Lynn's flavor, who's different from Ramona's flavor. And what's
Yes.
cool about the flavors tell you a lot about the people who are doing the channeling.
Yes. Absolutely.
They really do.
Yes. Yeah.
You actually, in some ways, you can actually learn more from the flavor than you can from the conversation.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
It's kind of like it's body language without the body.
Ooh, I like that.
That's a
I
really good
like that.
point. Yeah.
It's a good one.
Ramona, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you started, like before it was Betty, right? Before Betty had passed away, you had said that you weren't spiritual, you weren't really into this like woo, which is interesting for me because you were a classical musician, which is all about frequency. So now when you play, because I'm assuming you didn't just like huck that talent out the door and never do it again, but when you play, how different is experiencing the music while you're playing from before?
It's a great question. When I first started, when I was 16 or 17 years old, is when I decided I was going to become a professional musician. And I was playing catch up all the time. I went to a major conservatory here in the United States, and but those people had all been studying since they were 5 and 6 years old, and it was always this kind of catch up thing. And I was very, very, very head based. My body did not exist. No recognition of anything about me was below the neck, right? So so my playing reflected that. And then I started studying with people because of this desire to connect, where I was coming from a very difficult, shall we say, childhood, where I was completely shut down emotionally. I didn't know that I had feelings, and if I did know I was having a feeling, I didn't know what the feeling was. Like literally, in fact, many years later, I found this poster that my early therapist, my very first therapist, had given me. It was a picture of people's expressions with the name of the emotion underneath it. And I would sit and stare at that poster and then look in the mirror and see if I could figure out how I was feeling from that poster, like literally. Okay.
How?
So then about close to 10 years later, I was studying with two different trumpet teachers who were both trying to pull out my human, my emotion, my spiritual, and I wanted it, but I was afraid of it.
You didn't want that much.
I remember the first time I started playing, the way I was really hearing it in my head, the way I was feeling it in my heart, but I didn't know I was feeling it in my heart because I didn't know I had a heart. Like it was this weird mix. How Abraham talks a lot about the mix, right? So there was a lot of desire and a lot of fear, a lot of skill and a lot of resistance. It was very, very mixed. And I did that as a professional musician for about 15 years, I'm going to say total. Then I stopped playing and I don't play anymore. And I started doing other things. I eventually got into nonprofit management, and I worked with Betty on her nonprofit organization that she had started years before I met her. We ended up going back to it, and that became my life's purpose, was supporting her in her work. And so, and then I had taken I was trying to learn how to sell this organization, how to market this organization that we both worked for, that she had started. It was her, life's passion. And so I took the Sandler sales training course, and the guy who ran the division, that we were in Baltimore at the time, he had me take some tests, and then we sat down and talked. And he said, okay, so, and he's going through my results. He says, so your kinesthetic processor and your people were in. And I was like, what, wait, what? What? And this was, I was in my 40s, right? So as an education major, I knew that kinesthetic processors were those kids with ADHD and the kids who couldn't pay
Oh.
attention in school, who did really badly, and they were badly behaved and everything. And that wasn't me. I did well in school. I just assumed I was a visual processor based on my education, right? Turns out I'm a kinesthetic processor. So all of that long before Abraham. So I'm coming to grips with this whole thing, like I'm a kinesthetic processor. What does that mean for me? And by now I've stopped playing music, which had become the only outlet that I had for my true emotions. So at that point, that's one of the reasons why it was so devastating to me to lose Betty, because Betty had become my professional, my emotional, my spiritual, my mental, my financial, my everything. And so for her to be gone, it was like I was gone. And so to come full circle back around and to get back into my body, I've only been in the hot seat once with Abraham, and it was that in that first year. And I asked a couple of questions, but the question that mattered, the one that I needed to ask was, you say that we are receiving our guidance in our feelings, and I don't understand, is that like an emotion or is that a physical sensation? Because feelings can mean either one, right? So I was like, I don't remember exactly how I said the question, but basically along the lines like, can I just be kind of happy, like, woo, I'm happy, but I don't feel it in my body anywhere? And they were like, no, it's always in your body. If you can't feel it in your body, then you're not fully in touch with the guidance. And I was like, really? Because I was still living from the neck down, from the neck up, rather. And so I spent the next 2 years chewing on that answer and getting back into my body, into the breath, into the heart, into the emotions. And that's when my life really started, was right in that process. So great question.
Interesting. I never pursued a professional career as a classical musician, but I started with piano and later on became a rock and roll musician and did that for a while and then stopped.
Nice. Uh-huh.
I stopped until about 3 years ago when my brother bought me a cheap electronic keyboard and I started playing piano again.
Nice.
So after a 40-year gap, I've been reintroducing it into my life. And when you were talking about the body side of the emotion and you were tying it into what it could be like when you played, except you didn't do that. You had that blocked out. I could identify with that because when I was in my earliest years learning piano, it was all from the head up. It was all from the neck up. Now when I'm playing almost everything based on the emotion. My technical skill is like, it's okay, it's not too bad. But everything that's coming out is coming out emotionally. And it's an entirely different experience.
Totally
entirely different. Now I'm like,
night and day.
I played piano because I kind of liked it, but I also didn't like my teacher so much, so I kind of lost interest after a while. Now I don't even care about the piano. I just like being able to express the music.
Yeah, nice.
I mean, the keyboard is there. It's actually not a really great keyboard. Sometimes I wish I had like a nice Steinway or something, but it almost doesn't even matter. What matters is there are sounds coming out, and those sounds resonate.
Yeah. How does it feel? Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. And as a result, I think I'm probably making better music than I ever made when I was young.
Oh, I guarantee it. I've never heard you play either one, but I guarantee it's much better music.
Well, actually, I've heard the theme music. I wrote the theme music. I played the theme music that you heard at the beginning of the show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice.
But that connection, that emotional connection, when you allow it to come through, it almost doesn't even matter what your skill level is.
That's right.
because the emotion takes over. So in a sense, that's musical channeling, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's how we have 5-year-olds just sitting down and playing the piano, because
Yeah.
the skill the skill comes from the vibration, not the other way around. We're
Right.
not creating the vibration. We're receiving and then transmitting the vibration, and everything else is an expression of that,
Yes.
including which fingers do what on the keyboard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's how you end
Cool.
up with Mozart's.
Yeah. Yeah.
So beautiful.
I remember when the movie Amadeus came out, and I remember,
Great movie.
wasn't that a great movie? I mean,
Yeah.
he was just so totally out of control. Fabulous. But I remember when the movie came out, how, first of all, it shook up all of the traditional ideas about what Mozart was like and upset a lot of critics in the process.
Sure.
But it also showed a human side to music that had never really been shown on screen before. To the best of my knowledge, I can't even remember any time that.
No, I agree. It was groundbreaking.
It really was.
It was astonishing. Yeah.
It was astonishing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, I remember him, chasing his wife under the piano. I mean, things like that.
Well, and the king saying, "Well, there are just too many notes." He decided
too many
not
notes, right?
too many notes. Well, there are neither too many nor too few. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, what a great movie. Yeah.
Really, really good. As usual, we fly through these hours and we have so much fun. And I asked myself afterward, like, did we really cover it all? Did we cover any of it?
There's no such thing as it all. That's for sure.
I don't think there is, no. But we do have to we have to follow a little bit of logic here, because there is a little bit of organization to it. So one of the things that we like to do, first of all, is to find out, for somebody who wants to get that secret, are you willing to share the secret about, how does somebody find the podcast? Is that something you
Oh,
can actually do?
absolutely. And it's actually really easy. You just go to, now you can't just go to my website, because it's not on the website. Like, you can find the link of it, but it's ramonagaley.com, which is my website, and then /private-podcast.
Okay.
Really easy that way.
Okay.
Yeah. ramonagaley.com /private-podcast.
So are you okay with me linking that in the show notes to make it easy?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah,
okay.
absolutely. I'm teasing a lot about, that you have to have.
Well,
the
I don't
link,
know how far we're carrying this theme out. I mean, this could be really involved.
It's not like this. It's not meant to be, restrictive. It's just meant to be fun. So the only reason there's not a link to it on my actual homepage is because I've promised everybody it's a private podcast. Otherwise, I'd put a link on there, and I might eventually, But yeah, no, it's not top secret. It's just
oh my gosh, there is a website that I was just thinking of, and I can't remember. It's like a conspiracy website. Anyway, it's a website for some company that does something. Anyway, people talk about it in conspiracy chat rooms. Anyway, there's like a secret button at the bottom. It's like a little thing, but if you miss it, you miss it. But you can find it if you're really, if you know what you're looking for, and that is the door. And you click that button, and then like a picture.
That's what I should do for this.
Exactly.
That's what you should do. Button.
A secret door. Yeah, a secret button.
I love it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like a duck, or sometimes it's like a whatever, but it's really small, and you have if you're burning through the website, you'll never find it. But if you know, you know.
If you know, you know. I love it. I'm gonna steal that totally. It's like the Jeep owners, they leave little ducks on each other's Jeeps. There's like a thing.
Yeah.
They're like little rubber ducks, and you leave it on a Jeep owner's, like either on the handle or on their windshield or whatever. And it's just as far as I know, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a little if you know, you know. If you don't know, you're like, what's this? And you throw it away.
It's a weird duck.
And it kind of, what you're talking about kind of reminds me of, those video games, which I don't really play video games, but you have to know the secret to ascend to the next level, or to get the correct weapon so that you can defeat, the big monster or whatever it is. It's kind of like that. It's like you have to know the insider scoop. I love it.
We're having too much fun here. That's all there is to it. But we do have to draw to a close. So I told you earlier how we have a thing that we do at the end. And now
I can't wait.
This is kind of a cool thing that started about 2.5 years ago, when I realized that because we're putting out free content, and other people who come onto the show, they're free content creators, and there's all this free content that's been created that no one's actually getting appreciated for. And I said, well, we can do something about that. So I like to say, on behalf of those people you've never met, Ramona, you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, who've been consuming this content you've been putting out, on their behalf, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Oh, well, you're welcome, and thank you. That's very touching. Thank you so much. That feels really good.
That's why I like doing it. I love seeing the reaction when, oh, wow, it just comes through.
It really does. That's beautiful. Thank you.
And then I have one last thing that I do at the end of every show, because I have wonderful co-hosts, including Jody Lynn. My co-hosts are very insightful. They have all these really great perspectives on what happens in the conversation. And they always have a wonderful way of tying everything together. And Jody Lynn's been thinking about this. So I know this is going to be something really cool that comes out here. But Jody Lynn, what's the ribbon today? How do you tie it all?
The pressure. No, I'm just
Pressure.
Oh man, to tie it all together. I think a lot of times we live in this superficial world where we're not taught how to feel our feelings or what that actually means, what our feelings are. Like Ramona, you said you had that picture, and does my face look angry? What does it look like? And there's so many people in this world today that are feeling alone and having this, detrimental experience or going through difficult times because they don't understand how to feel. And when we tap in, what you've reminded me of today is really when we tap into our body, into our heart, and into these emotions. That's where life's secret sauce is. That's where the joys of life can be found. That's where the magic is. And that's where true change really stems from. So thank you for that reminder, Ramona.
That is beautiful and so well said.
Now you know why I do this at the end of every show. I mean,
Yes.
it's better every time too. I don't know how she does it. She keeps upping the game. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, that's because she's magic, just like you, Walt.
That's right. She is magic.
Just a different flavor.
Different flavor.
Aren't we all?
So Ramona
Yes.
Galey, thank you so much for joining us on the show. This has been a blast. This has been
Thank
so
you,
much
Walt.
fun.
Thank you, Jody Lynn. I had a really wonderful time. Thank you for having me on.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.